Good evening, America. Welcome to this special edition of Just the News, No Noise. Tonight, we are partnering with the American Conservation Coalition to discuss a number of important subjects like energy policy under the incoming Trump administration, as well as environmental policies, because President Trump has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do much better on both counts than prior administrations. A lot of Americans care about the environment. A lot of Americans care about the energy supply. They don't buy into the new Green Deal. Polling clearly shows that that's the case. But there is an extraordinary opportunity to make the environment cleaner while making energy more plentiful in this country, something that's going to be essential as we enter into a new era of technology and the AI generation of America takes effect. We're going to need more power, and it can be done more cleanly and more abundantly than prior administrations have achieved. Nuclear, natural gas combined could be really, really a powerful team. But to get there, there's a lot of things that have to change, including the regulatory structure in this great country. It is impossible to get energy projects started without months and years of delay. A thing called NEPA reform. It sounds like a four-letter word, and it is, NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. It goes all the way back to the Richard Nixon years. But it has become, instead of a good thing for the environment, a stranglehold around the entire economy. And there's been some really important groundwork laid in 2024 to set the stage for some sort of reforms. Those reforms become the springboard to an entire new generation of energy generation in America, as well as a cleaner form of energy with nuclear and natural gas combining quickly to move our energy needs forward. We've got an all-star panel tonight to talk about these opportunities. You probably haven't heard a lot about them because they don't get talked about in the legacy press very much, but they are some of the most important opportunities that the incoming Trump administration will have. Joining us right now to kick us off on this great conversation, the senior president at Boundary Stone Partners, a group that deals with clean energy finance, domestic politics, and more. She's also the co-chair of America Builds Coalition. That's a pretty exciting group. Somebody that's leading the permitting reform here in Washington, D.C. And also, she worked previously in House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's office. Joining us now, Emily Domenech. Emily, good to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is an exciting issue, and I want to start off with something that I think has become more apparent to the American public. For the last 20 years, the environmental dialogue has been dominated by the far left in America. But before that time, Republicans were really the big conservationists in this country. Teddy Roosevelt with the national parks, Ronald Reagan with all he did during his presidency. Is this the moment, the Trump second administration, where conservatives reclaim the conservation mantle?
It certainly could be. I think we have a unique opportunity here where the needs to build and meet our growing power demands from AI and data centers and manufacturing, that is just a core part of what President Trump believes in as he comes back to the White House. Those things really intersect well with the exact kind of reforms we need to best take care of our lands, our forests, and our wilderness areas and preserve them for future generations. Ironically, you mentioned this in your opening, the National Energy Policy Act, NEPA, is one of the biggest hurdles to protecting our forests in the West, just like it's a big hurdle for building new transmission lines and natural gas power plants and renewable energy across the country. So it's a bringing together these groups of stakeholders that didn't work together in the past for a shared goal of making it easier to build things in America, making it easier to clean up our forests and deal with the wildfire challenges that we have in the West. And the policy solutions for those things are the same. And frankly, President Trump really was a champion for those in the first administration, and we have an opportunity to make them lasting here in the future.
Yeah, that's the exciting part. Now, there has been a lot of groundwork, a lot of spade work done in the last year, not a lot of it visible to the American public. But talk about some of the things you and your team have been working on with both parties in Congress to set the stage for NEPA reform in 2025.
So I've got to give credit to one of my favorite members of Congress, Chairman Bruce Westerman, who runs the House Natural Resources Committee. He's an engineer by trade and a forester. He's really been a champion for moving forward this streamlining of the NEPA process. And he's built some really good allies across the aisle. I look at Congressman Scott Peters from California. Obviously, Senator Joe Manchin has been really engaged this Congress in trying to move this ball forward. But there's a new generation of members who are coming in who want to be able to move these policies forward and who I think have given us a good starting point for next Congress in terms of really moving substantive reform.
Yeah, that's exciting to see those sort of forces come together. I think NEPA started as a good intended thing that we want to protect the environment, make sure that projects comply with common sense regulation. But over time, it sort of became a stranglehold. I think in the last half century, we've only had one new nuclear power plant built in America, and that took like 10 or 12 years to really get from start to finish. Talk a little bit about how NEPA sort of became weaponized over the last half century.
Weaponized is the right word. I think we went from having an environmental movement that was very focused on making it more difficult to build things in America. They sort of saw building and development as a threat to the natural world. And all of those legacy environmental laws are really designed around that idea. What we've seen in the last particularly 20 or 30 years is that the NEPA process has been really weaponized by the environmental left, particularly through the courts. So they use these NEPA permits as a way to sue the federal government to say, you didn't do what you needed to do in this permit. Let's drag out the process. Let's go to the court. Let's do a long, lengthy judicial review. And then by the end of it, the project developer often runs out of money or doesn't have the financing to actually complete the project. Interestingly enough, the Breakthrough Institute, which is a rather left-leaning organization, came out with a report earlier this year that said that 80% of those lawsuits that are filed are frivolous. And they're often targeted against clean energy. So the environmental left is kind of working against the things they say they support. We really have to change this sort of incentive to go and sue to delay project as opposed to engaging in a productive way on the front end.
That's really important. I think even John Podesta, President Biden's climate change envoy, not exactly a conservative guy, but he also has acknowledged that NEPA just has gotten out of hand and become an impediment even to the things that Joe Biden was trying to build in the last couple of years. How did that mindset set into place? Because I think behind all of this, there's a false choice that you can't develop and grow and make energy and grow and have in-house minerals and be friendly to the environment. It's kind of a false choice, isn't it?
It's absolutely a false choice. It's something I like to remind my colleagues on the left that emissions actually went down year over year under President Trump because free market policies often drive the cleanest, most efficient energy to be the dominating force in the market. We know that if we produce things here in the United States, be it natural gas, renewable power, nuclear power, we do it in a cleaner, more environmentally friendly way, not just for clean water and clean air, but also for global emissions. So if we want to be able to drive down global emissions, building things in the United States is really a big part of that solution. And it's something that I think we've seen, you mentioned John Podesta, you've seen the environmental left take some steps in this direction as they've seen the money they wanted to invest through the IRA get tied up in this regulatory process. I was a part, when I worked for Speaker McCarthy, I was a part of the first reforms that have ever been made to the NEPA statute in the last 40 years as part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We negotiated that with the White House. It was a really good first step, but I've spent the last year in the private sector trying to convince, those same NGOs that we need to do a lot more work to keep the courts from slowing down this progress. We can't lead on global emissions if we don't build in America.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that false choice has colored a lot of decision making. And it's nothing like getting caught in your own quagmire to realize that maybe you need some change. I think that's what happened with John Podesta and the Biden administration at the end of their time here. You have a fantastic podcast, Political Climate, and recently you touched on a subject that I think is one of the great opportunities as this environmental movement and the extreme environmental movement took grip in Washington for a while. Our national security provisions, things like rare elements, left our country, and we became more dependent on China for the rare elements, Russia for uranium for our nuclear power plants. So behind some of this reform also is a national security question that doesn't often get addressed with these policies. Talk a little bit about the challenges we have with rare earths and with uranium and other mining products that, by the way, aren't being mined right now here in America.
Absolutely. There's a real disconnect between, what we've heard from the Biden administration that, they want to have tax credits to incentivize clean energy and they want to build our manufacturing capacity here in the United States. But at the same time, they're denying permits for mining the critical minerals that are necessary to build that technology here in America. We have incredible natural resources in this country, and we should be utilizing all of them, be it natural gas, be it critical minerals. We should take advantage of all of those resources. resources. And we really cede that territory to China if we don't develop our own critical minerals and if we make it too difficult to get the permits to build processing facilities here in the United States. So I think if you are serious about meeting our energy demands and the global energy demands, you need to be able to say, we need to use all of America's resources and we need to be able to use them immediately. We cannot afford to wait 10 years for a permit to start a mine. Otherwise, China's just going to continue to dominate those global markets.
Yeah, I think people hear 10 years, they say, oh, that's hyperbole. It's not. It actually literally takes a decade to get something.
10 years would be quick for a nuclear plant.
That would actually be historically fast. You're right. It's crazy. And I think most Americans are just starting to get educated on it. All right, so we've got some important elements of what could create progress in the Trump administration. NEPA reform, clearly the beginning of a new mining industry in America so we can get some of those resources and get off foreign independence. A third one seems to me, and we had Nathan O on recently, who's a very big disruptive force in the grid sector. Our grid is so creaky and behind the times, it can't meet the demands of an AI economy that's coming over the horizon. Can you talk a little bit about the elements of grid reform or grid innovation that could get us going there?
Yeah, I think it's a two-part process. One, we need to be able to incorporate more innovative technologies into the grid that we have today so that it can work more efficiently, so that we can move power more efficiently, and that it's frankly safer and more secure. The cybersecurity element here is one we shouldn't forget. The second thing is that it's often described that transmission is something that's only needed for clean energy. That's certainly true. But with the AI demand that we expect to see coming on the grid in the next 5 to 10 years, we cannot afford to not build transmission out for natural gas, for nuclear, for all the resources that we need to be able to deliver power to meet those energy demands. We are expecting skyrocketing energy demand in the manufacturing sector, in the data center sector, and we're not going to be able to meet that or provide that power in a reliable way without a grid that is robust and has the ability to utilize new technologies. So I really do think that certainly permitting is a part of that process, but helping to connect both the generators and the power demand side from the Amazon data centers of the world is a really critical part to being able to ensure that we win this AI race against China.
Yeah, you aren't kidding. It's really important. Nathan O, who creates these microgrids for some of the big tech companies, and now are doing them for public cities and municipalities. He's disrupting that. And I think that microgrid to microgrid to microgrid could be really interesting. It was famously said during the Reagan years that people are policy. And I want to ask a little bit, President Trump has some big policies. We know what they are. How does his energy team look to you? Does he have the right team to make the sort of historic changes that this country is going to need?
I think so far his nominees in the environment and energy space are fantastic. Governor Doug Burgum is well respected. He's worked on both the innovative tech side. He's been a manager. He's got that leadership ability, and he understands sort of the ins and outs of how energy is developed in the West, which is such a critical part of solving this problem. Chris Wright is another great choice. I think he's got all of this experience building big things in the industry, which is such a big part of what DOE does. And he's got experience not just as an oil and gas executive, but as an investor in some innovative nuclear and geothermal, in all of these other areas of innovative energy that I think are part of that future mix. Lee Zeldin, another great leader who did a fantastic job in galvanizing support in New York and as a member of Congress. I think he's got his work cut out for him at the EPA. It's a challenging agency to lead, but I think he's well suited to take on that challenge. And it's really exciting. I look forward to seeing more really qualified and robust nominees from the Trump administration, because they know what they need to get the job done here, and we're seeing that play out in the choices they make on personnel.
Pretty exciting, and it is a pretty amazing team. We've had them all on the show in the last year, and they all got big ideas, and they also have great experience for moving the ball forward in a town that often drags its feet. Last quick question for you. Nuclear had fallen out of favor for a while. It feels like in both parties right now, nuclear is beginning to enjoy a political renaissance. If permitting reform comes in, could we start to see some nuclear plants come online quicker, faster, and smaller?
I hope so. I did some time at the science committee in my career, and I've worked on advanced nuclear for over a decade. It is so exciting to see some of these companies that went from the idea phase to actual negotiating power purchase agreements to build here in the United States. I think nuclear financing is something that's still a challenge, and I think the Trump administration is well suited to solve that. But permitting is a big part of it, and I think we'll see a big range, not just traditional nuclear, but microreactors and modular reactors come online in the next decade.
Yeah, the innovation going on inside our country is remarkable. We just got to get it on the ground. Emily, it's a great honor to have you on. For folks who want to get your podcast, remind them how they can download it.
Political Climate, it's available anywhere you can get podcasts, and you can follow me on X at EHDominage.
That's really great. You are an incredibly important voice, and I love the podcast. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, more on this very important special report brought to you by American Conservation Coalition. We'll have that. More discussion right after these messages. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News American Conservation Coalition special report. We're taking a deep dive into possible reforms and policies in President Trump's next term. There's an incredible moment where the innovation of America and the politics of America can get aligned and create a whole new legacy for this country, technologically, economically, and security-wise. Our next guest is the former commissioner of the United States Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, one of the most important bodies in Washington. He's also a great voice on the need to reform our permitting process and build here in America. He is Neil Chatterjee. Neil, great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Great honor. Listen, you oversaw one of the most important regulatory agencies in America. I don't think Americans understand just how important regulatory and permitting reform is going to be to this Trump presidency. It is the catalyst for a lot of innovation, isn't it?
It's big. And my former agency, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, a lot of people are probably, what is that? What the FERC? It is probably the single most significant agency that most people have never heard of. But its responsibility is to keep the lights on for Americans, to make sure that when we hit the switch, the lights come on, that when it's really cold out, we have heat. When it's really hot out, we have air conditioning. That's a pretty significant responsibility, and one that my colleagues and I took quite seriously.
Yeah, that's an amazing agency. I've got to see it in action for many, many years in this town, and it is. A lot of people don't know it, but we would be desperate without it. There is a lot of moment. In the last segment, we started to talk about this. All right, we know all the things. We want to bring down energy prices, all those things. But the greatest competition in technological history is upon us, the AI era of the world. China wants to eat our lunch. We need to stay up with them both from a security and economic standpoint. Tell us what AI does to the entire energy picture under Donald Trump.
Yeah, look, the reality is that AI and winning the AI race is so critical for our future, for our national security. We cannot allow the Chinese Communist Party to dominate AI. We must win the AI race. But in order to do so, it's going to take a tremendous amount of energy, of electricity, of power. Power is the underlying key to winning the AI race. And President-elect Trump understands that. Now, herein lies the challenge. He made two commitments in energy to the American people. He promised to win the AI race for national security purposes, and he promised to bring down the cost of electricity to alleviate some of the burden, the inflationary pressure that Americans have been feeling. And in order to achieve that, I think it's going to totally upend energy policy, quite frankly, on both sides of the aisle. For the last decade and a half, we've sort of calcified in this arena where if you're for fossil fuels, you're of the political right, and if you're for clean energy and climate solutions, you're of the political left. I think both parties are going to have to recalibrate. On the political left, I think there needs to be a recognition that there is no way we can win the AI race against China without fossil fuels. We're going to need to build new gas plants. We're going to need to build more natural gas pipeline infrastructure in order to have the sufficient power necessary to win this race against China. On the political right, I think there needs to be a recognition that we cannot possibly win the AI race with fossil fuels alone, that we're going to need every available electron. And that means supporting policies that enhance solar and storage and geothermal and nuclear, and also things like demand response and energy efficiency and virtual power plants and distributed energy resources. We need it all, truly. And I think once Americans recognize the national security imperative, they'll come around and come together, quite frankly, to support the policies that will be necessary to win this AI race.
I watched the president in a conversation about a year ago say, my energy policy, I'm going to be Captain Kirk going down to Scotty. Need more power, my friend, need more power. He understands it in a very big way.
He gets it, yeah.
The nuclear equation has been, we've only built one nuclear power plant in over half a century. That took like 10 to 15 years with all the permitting. But if we can get permitting sped up, the nuclear innovation cycle has been extraordinary in America. We can gain a lot of wattage quickly from there, can't we?
Look, it's our single greatest form of carbon-free baseload power, meaning it runs all the time. We need it. But there's huge challenges to building nuclear power. You mentioned permitting and the reforms that are necessary to get these plants built, get these advanced reactors, small modular reactors. You know, the future of nuclear is very exciting. We got to get these plants built. But at the end of the day, they're still costly. You're still talking about a nuclear entity that needs to be guarded 24/7, 365, meaning you have to have an army there to protect it at all times, and that's just expensive. And I think compared to other sources of power generation, therein lies the biggest challenge to building new nuclear. I think the nice thing about the surge in demand that's coming from AI growth and data centers and cloud computing and quantum computing and crypto and Bitcoin mining is that it's extended a lifeline to nuclear plants that were otherwise struggling. Nuclear has really struggled to compete, particularly in the competitive power markets, the last decade and a half. Yep. This coming growth in demand is really going to be a boost to nuclear power plants that have needed this kind of demand, because now everybody wants, all the tech players in AI, they want that carbon-free nuclear power.
Yeah, they sure do. And that's probably their easiest choice, or one of their easiest choices for big load. There is one other potential quagmire, and that is our grid is a little creaky. There's some real amazing innovation going on with microgrids and linking them together, companies like VoltaGrid. Tell us a little bit about fixing the grid and what that could possibly do to this equation.
Yeah, again, it comes back to permitting reform. We need to build more transmission. We need to use grid enhancing technologies. There's a lot of exciting stuff out there. There's technologies like dynamic line ratings and ambient adjusted ratings. We can use AI. We can use satellite imagery and AI for things like vegetation management and wildfire risk mitigation. There's a lot of exciting things that technology can give us to better enable the grid, but it starts with transmission. We just need to build more transmission in this country to get more power to where the demand for that power is. And whether it's a natural gas pipeline to deliver gas or a transmission line to deliver clean energy, it's just way too hard to build things in this country, which is why I really want to see legislative permitting reform get done in Congress so that we can build the grid of the future, a 21st century grid that we can be proud of. Look, you said that the grid is creaky. It is creaky. I still think it's man's greatest invention to date. It is actually amazing. And when I was at FERC and I traveled around the world and I met with our allies, we here can be very critical of our own energy infrastructure. Our grid is the envy of the world. Everybody else wants to learn from us how we do it so well. I think we do it great. I think we can do it even better, but it will take permitting reform to put us in a place to do it better.
I have a funny feeling we'll even be a greater envy to the world in 4 years after the Trump administration gets done with energy policy. Neil, what a great opportunity to have you on. Thank you for your great service to the country. Folks, more right after this commercial break. All right, America, welcome back to this special edition of Just the News, No Noise. We're partnering with the American Conservation Coalition to highlight important energy policies as well as environmental policies that the new Trump administration can administer and change the future of this country. Joining us now is the CEO and chairman of the Hudson Sustainable Group, which invests in sustainable and resource-efficient energy, Neil Auerbach. Neil, great to have you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You have been in this industry a long time, and I think we're at this extraordinary moment where our technology and our capability and our innovation is speeding ahead, but our political processes, particularly the regulatory structure, are lagging behind. And so some of our best ideas and technologies can't get into the marketplace quick enough. How do we fix that in the next administration?
Well, we have to fix it quickly. I'll give you a fun fact. For 20 years, the energy load, the amount of electricity demand has been stagnant in the United States. Over the last year or so, it's actually spiked and is predicted to go up at least 50%, perhaps more, over the next 5 to 10 years. And there are some predictions that it'll actually double. And that's a little bit scary because that is the lifeblood of the US economy. And so we have to both build more generation and we have to build more transmission to get that energy to the American consumer, both personal, residential, commercial, industrial, and then the big power users, the utilities. So that has to happen, and it's going to need permitting reform throughout the economy to be able to permit transmission and generation, and that would include small modular reactors, which has a relatively slow permitting time as well. Certainly faster than the big ones, but a little bit too slow.
Yeah. There's a four-letter word that comes up a lot in Washington these days. I haven't heard it for years, but it's important. NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Tell us a little bit why that, which started as a good intention thing in the 70s, has sort of become a millstone around progress.
That's right. Well, that's because I think that there are interest groups here that are frankly anti-economic progress, and they believe there's a core belief on the left, and that's on the extreme left, that any kind of progress, economic progress, basically threatens the environment. And so you have this knee-jerk reaction where there are interest groups that are coming to slow down projects. There are cases where it took years and years to figure out how to safeguard a toad or a community of toads in the in the California desert, and that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. There's certainly the cost-benefit analysis that goes into NEPA permitting today is a little bit off whack, and hopefully DOGE or other parts of the administration or Congress are going to be able to address that and get faster action on permitting.
Yeah. There's been a false choice, I think, in the political marketplace, not in the economic marketplace, that you can either have more energy or less carbon, but you can't have both. And obviously that's not really true at all. A low carbon economy is achievable with an all of the above approach. And I know you just wrote a column on this. It's really, really important about how we get there and how we dispel maybe some of the falsehoods.
Absolutely. The first thing we have to do is actually stop conflating climatism, the belief in the science of climate change, and clean energy. I certainly do believe that climate change is a serious concern. However, I don't label it a crisis. And what happens to those who label it a crisis, you get the equal and opposite reaction to label it a hoax. The truth is somewhere in the middle. It is a problem. It's a serious problem, but it also has to be balanced against the needs of humanity and of the United States in particular to have a flourishing economy, which also benefits human flourishing and well-being. And so by adopting an all-of-the-above approach and by getting the NIMBY attitude out of the interest groups in the United States and the US as a whole, we can build everything here. We have all the resources, the mineral resources. We can bring manufacturing back here, and we can become an energy superpower. Believe it or not, it's not fossil fuels alone. Today, clearly, fossil fuels is still the big boy in the yard. But just to give you another fun fact, 40% of the global economy is now, of the electricity generation, is powered by renewables. And so that is really important, and we're getting pretty close to that in the United States. It's happening with or without government support. It happens faster with government support. And when you have this advent of massive demand, a lot of it coming from data centers and other aspects of electrification, which, by the way, includes manufacturing. If Donald Trump wants to have the U.S. be a manufacturing superpower, we need a lot more electricity. And the only way that happens is with all of the above.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he says that. He's an all-above guy now, and clearly he's put a team around him. I think that gets it. When you have an energy team led by an entrepreneur that was in really the digital era, there's a sense of that entrepreneurialism that you bring to government policy that's sometimes missing when you get, sort of policy heads that take those jobs. How important is the team around the president? What's your early evaluation of how they'll approach this?
Very positively, very constructive on the administrative front. There's clearly going to be a recalibration. We're going to stop putting the thumb against fossil fuels, but we're not going to actually stop clean energy.
Right.
Certainly, there's going to be, a question about what we do with the Inflation Reduction Act, but that goes into Congress. And Congress and the Republican majorities rest on very, very thin majorities, particularly for the first 90 days until the new elections in the 3 Republican districts take place. And so even beyond that, I think that's a tougher slog. But in terms of at tackling what the administration can do, which is a lot, we have an action-oriented team that I believe is going to be very good for the U.S. economy and very good for all of the above, both fossil fuels and also for low carbon.
Yeah. You had some interesting thoughts on selling solar energy. Is it a climate panacea or an economic juggernaut? I'd love you to referee that because, again, that's one of those choices, but there's somewhere in the middle is a really interesting answer, isn't there?
Absolutely. Well, look, in particular now, so the answer is it helps on climate, but it's not an absolute solution here. This is going to take, the climate issue is going to take concerted effort and frankly, a policy that allows China to triple its emissions over the last 20 years while the US drops its emissions by 20 to 25%. Solar is going to continue to be dripping in that faucet. And so eventually the bucket will fill, but you need to do other things and you need to decarbonize heavy industry. And so one of the nice things about the IRA that the folks in the fossil fuel industry support is that there are a lot of places in there that support decarbonization incentives, such as decarbonizing CO2 emissions, in other words, removing CO2 emissions, and also producing hydrogen. So those two are very good. It's actually in all of the above. There are a lot of fossil fuel companies that are very interested in that technology, and that certainly helps. But all of the above is the way to go until the new energies, the low carbon energies, which include the SMRs, the small and modular nuclear reactors, come online. This is a 20 to 30 year problem. It's not going to be solved overnight. It is a serious issue to tackle. It's not a crisis, but we do need to take action and be cognizant of what CO2 emissions do to planetary health.
Yeah, and they can both be achieved at the same time. I think that's what's exciting about this next generation is getting past the alternative that is one or the other. And I think that's one of the great moments. As you look out over the next year, coming up with money and rebalancing the budget to put the right priorities on all of the above will be a big part of this. But there's also an element of economic and national security ties to this policy because China's moving ahead quickly with AI. We can't fall behind in the AI race, and AI is perhaps the most power-hungry technology America's ever had, right?
Absolutely. It is absolutely power hungry, and the users of AI, the builders of the renters, if you will, of the servers in the AI data centers, all want clean energy. And so we had to solve that because the market is actually driving demand. And again, all of the above is going to be important. And here's what, if I could put in a plug for solar plus batteries and also small natural gas power plants that can go behind the meter. Transmission is going to take time to fix. Right now, in different parts of the country, there's up to a 7-year queue to get new transmission built. And that is a problem. So any opportunity that we have that will allow us to build behind the meter so that something that solar and battery storage can solve in tandem, because we need to build multiple sources to be able to operate 24/7. That's the way to go, because now you can actually bypass the transmission lines and sell the energy directly on site. The other way to go is actually put data centers next to wind farms. There's a lot of extra space on wind farms. Just sell that power directly. So there are many creative solutions to this problem that does not require transmission, but we've got to fix transmission, and we need to build more of all of the above, and certainly a healthy component of low carbon energy, because that's what the data center users and the owners want to power their AI centers. So that problem is going to take time to solve. Right now, we're going to have a little bit of a crunch, but I believe that over the next several years, you're going to see, and particularly under the Trump administration, the gates flown wide open to be able to permit and build as much of data centers and also generation to feed those data centers. And it's going to be a very exciting time for the U.S. economy.
Some of those alliances are already forming. Natural gas and solar companies working together, microgrids working together with data centers. It's a very interesting time. And I think you gave us a great dip into the future. Very interesting to see where we are. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for all the good work you're doing at the Hudson Sustainable. Great to have you on
Thank
today.
you so much.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere, because after the break, we're going to have the president of the American Conservation Coalition himself here, Chris Barnard, on the program right after these messages. Welcome back, everybody. We've been having an incredible conversation about the incredible opportunity that awaits the Trump 2.0 administration when it comes to energy and conservation. A historic moment where technology, policy, and economics line up, maybe for the first time in 2 decades. It's been made possible by our good friends tonight, our partners for the show, the American Conservation Coalition. And who better to talk about that opportunity as we close out the conversation than our good friend Chris Barnard, who is the president of that organization. Chris, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be here, John.
I love what ACC does, but maybe people tonight are hearing about it for the first time. Let's just start off. What does the ACC do? What's its mission, and how has it grown so quickly?
Yeah, well, we believe at ACC that conservation is conservative. We believe that this is an issue that has been owned by the left for far too long, and that actually conservatives not only care about this, but we have the right solutions to both protect our environment, unleash our economic prosperity, and compete with countries like China. And that's by building just the coolest, most amazing, innovative technologies right here in America. We just ended 2024 with 60,000 young members across the country, and we're just getting started.
That's amazing. 60,000 already, huh? That's amazing. This is a really important issue to win the narrative and the policy debates on, because for too much of the last 2 decades, there's been one sort of extreme agenda that relied on, all of us believing the world was about to come to an end, and there's only one solution. You got to give up energy to save the environment. And in fact, your group has shown, and I think educated so many people, including policymakers, you can expand energy and bring down carbon emissions. It feels like we have a president and administration that's aligned with that now too.
Yeah, I think so. And we've heard a lot about drill, baby, drill. I also think we should build, baby, build, innovate, baby, innovate. And that's what it's going to take. We want to be able to compete with China in the 21st century. And that means competing on all fronts. It's oil and gas. It's also wind and solar and battery storage technologies and nuclear and geothermal. We need to unleash that innovation right here in America. We need to bring those supply chains back home. I think this administration coming up in January understands that. I think that Chris Wright, who'll be Secretary of Energy, and Doug Burgum, who'll be Interior Secretary, they understand that, and we're excited to work with them hand in hand.
Yeah, it really is an all-star team of people. They have incredible industry bona fides, but they also have records of innovation. And I think there's an extraordinary moment. I think I said it earlier in the show with one of our guests. The innovation and technology cycle of America is speeding ahead, and the political cycle is falling behind. And so we have these technologies that can't get into the marketplace. It seems like this team is going to narrow that gap with things like NEPA reform and regulatory reform and speed things to the marketplace. That could be a game changer, right?
Yeah, no one knows that the number one obstacle to building out more energy, and especially clean energy in America, is actually government regulation. The permitting process, you talked about NEPA, holds back projects on average by nearly 5 years. Do you know who's not waiting? The Chinese Communist Party. They're approving new coal mines every day. They're building over 100 new nuclear plants right now. They've competed with us and beat us on solar supply chains and electric vehicle supply chains. And we are just falling behind because we've had bad policies. This next administration needs to focus on just letting America build, on coming up with the coolest innovations and technologies possible. That's how we win the 21st century clean energy arms race, not by holding ourselves back, but by unleashing American ingenuity.
Yeah, and we got this other technology that is electric hungry, AI, artificial intelligence. We can't afford to lose that to China because that will drive military national security strategy as well as the next age of innovation. Talk about the extraordinary demand that AI is going to put on the grid and how much more energy we got to create to keep up.
Yeah, well, you have supercomputers right now that are being built that will each take 1 gigawatt of energy. That's 2 nuclear plants right there. It's just astounding to think about. And the reality is that we can't be picking what energy sources we want versus others and picking winners and losers. We just need more clean energy, and energy, broadly speaking, that's an all of the above approach. And you look at a lot of the investments that are happening across America, most of those are actually in conservative red districts. We see like electric vehicle battery manufacturing, we see solar facilities, we see nuclear plants. All of these things are being built here in America, and we need to continue unleashing that because at the end of the day, if we want to compete with China when it comes to national security and energy security, we need to also beat them at this AI race. It's going to take a heck of a lot more energy. We should be producing that right here in America.
Yeah. one of the things that we've allowed to fall behind is our ability to have the key resources that drive technology, minerals, precious minerals, particularly rare earth minerals, but also things like uranium, which will drive the next generation of nuclear power here. That seems like this administration is intent on fixing that supply chain problem as well.
Look, what we've had in DC is an approach that over decades has locked up American resources. We will never, ever be able to compete with countries like Russia or China or other adversaries if we don't actually allow ourselves to mine the critical minerals that we have here at home, to unearth the resources that we've been blessed with. China right now controls 80+% of these critical minerals that are used for military equipment, for healthcare facilities, and for clean energy production. But we have those very same minerals here in America. We just don't allow ourselves to mine them. On average, it takes 29 years to open a new mine in America. It's just completely mind-bogglingly stupid. And we need to just start building and mining and doing all of those things here in America, because our future really, really does depend on it.
Yeah. And we mine and drill and develop more cleanly than any country in the world already. We don't get credit for that. We always seem to be shamed for our incredible environmental record. I want to talk a little bit about political stigma, because I think for a long time, being in favor of the environment or conservation was a bad thing because you were lopped in with the Green New Deal and the climate extremists. But the history of the Republican Party and conservative movement is some of the greatest conservationists were Republican, Ronald Reagan and Teddy Roosevelt and others. How do Republicans get out of being backed into a corner and say we can own the environment without being extreme?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is to be proud of our past. Who founded the first national park in America? A Republican president. Who was known as the conservation president? A Republican president. Who founded the Environmental Protection Agency? A Republican president. It's such a bizarre thing to me that in the last few decades, this issue has been dominated by people from Al Gore through AOC, when we don't know that conservation is an inherently conservative principle. And so we need to stop allowing the other side to monopolize and dominate this issue. We need to stand up and say, actually, not only do we care, but we have better solutions. Our solutions will actually unleash innovation. They will compete with countries like China. They will actually unleash economic prosperity, and they will protect the environment at the same time. Why do we have to choose between all of those things? That's been the status quo, and we're working hard to change that.
Yeah, it's been a false choice. By the way, there's only one president that actually made America fully energy independent and brought down carbon emissions at the same time, Donald Trump. He didn't get any credit for that, but we got to keep reminding people of it. Chris, stick around. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to dive in a little bit more about what lies ahead in 2025. But first, we'll hear a quick word from our sponsors. Welcome back, America. Just a few more minutes before we hand off to my good friend Grant Stinchfeld, and we're here with American Conservation Coalition President and my good friend Chris Barnard. Chris, I think the all of the above mantra, which has been uttered by many presidents but not always executed. Barack Obama said all above but really wasn't. Joe Biden said an all above, really wasn't. It does seem like Donald Trump's all of the above approach could mean a really incredible marriage between natural gas and nuclear power. Am I seeing that right? Are those things starting to come together as a powerhouse?
Yeah, well, the reality is that when you have an energy system, you want it to be affordable and reliable. That's incredibly important. And for so long, this conversation has actually forgot about the affordability and reliability piece of that. But also, ideally, you want to have increasingly clean energy. And you mentioned nuclear. Nuclear is not just reliable and affordable, it's also clean. It is the largest source of clean electricity in America. There's so much exciting innovation happening with fusion, with next generation small modular reactors, and America just needs to continue building more nuclear reactors, and that's a matter of letting us build. Again, like we've talked about all of today, that is a political choice that we can have. You mentioned natural gas. The reason why we have reduced emissions more than the next 8 countries combined is because we've transitioned from coal to natural gas. That was not a government thing. That was not a top-down mandate. That was American innovation coming up with a superior technology, allowing us to unleash economic prosperity while reducing emissions at the same time. I think that is the way that you approach these kinds of questions, with nuance as opposed to with ideology.
Yeah. all throughout the show, there's been one common theme: the importance of NEPA reform, the National Environmental Policy Act. How important is it, and how quick could it happen in 2025? It seems like a lot of groundwork was laid during the 23 and 24 timeframe to maybe make reform possible in 25.
Yeah, and I really don't think it's an exaggeration to say that dramatically reforming NEPA is probably one of the most important economic and national security priorities for the United States of America today. It is one of the biggest things holding us back in our competition with China. It is holding back productivity, holding back technological innovation. It is imperiling our national security and our energy security. And you know who actually started trying to do NEPA reform? It was Trump in his first administration. That has been rolled back in this current administration. And when Trump comes back in, I hope that he'll continue prioritizing this, because it is just an incredibly important issue. And if we get this wrong, we might be putting ourselves at a disadvantage for a generation to come.
Yeah, and China will be laughing at us as they roll on by us. A lot of interesting players in the Trump administration. EPA, Lee Zeldin may have one of the biggest and toughest portfolios, because you got to change the culture of the bureaucracy. At the same time, you're changing the regulatory stature. He seems like a guy with a lot of skill set. A lot of President Trump's success is going to depend on him, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lee Zeldin was a champion for these issues in Congress, and I fully expect him to be a champion for these issues as administrator of the EPA. And at the EPA, you kind of have a tricky balance, right? Because you don't want to stifle the economy, you don't want to impose unnecessary regulations, while still having some of the highest standards in the world for clean air and clean water. I think there are a lot of things that the EPA can do to remove toxic chemicals out of our water systems, to make America healthy again, like everyone is talking about nowadays. And I think Lee Zeldin is the man to do that.
Yeah, I think build, baby, build will be a real mantra, along with drill, baby, drill. I'm pretty sure that's going to be it. There's already some pretty cool things happening at this moment. Uranium mines are reopening in South Texas. There's cryptocurrency mining going on. Some AI fuels demand is creating these portable nuclear reactors. And then you got companies like VoltaGrid, which are creating these mini grids that are transforming the way grids can be upgraded. The innovation cycle has already started. Donald Trump is going to put steroids into it?
Well, I really hope so, because the reality is that our politics has lagged behind this technological progress for a very long time. We've been stuck in this very weird technological tribalism between both sides, where on the left they've said, oh, we just want wind and solar and we'll get rid of everything else. And on the right, sometimes they said, well, we're good with oil and gas and we don't need these other innovations and technologies. Our approach is, let's have all of them. Let's win and compete and innovate in all of these technologies. And the reality is, in an increasingly electrical and modernizing world with AI and technology and all the things that you have there, you just need to have more sources of energy. You need to allow more innovation. You need things like smart grids and nuclear reactors and just like flexible technological approaches to this. And I think Trump understands that. I think if he's surrounding himself with people like Elon Musk, who's been the pioneer of both solar energy in America and electric vehicles, you need to do it in a business smart way. And having people like that at the top, I think, is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, no doubt. He really has some really interesting innovators at the top of that cycle. We got a minute left, and I was thinking about the Trump 2.0 administration. It is the place where maybe all the innovation cycle and the policy cycles catch up, and there is this incredible legacy of the next generation of America that is born in these next 4 years. Is that an overstatement, or is that really the opportunity that President Trump's been handed and he needs to execute?
I mean, Donald Trump has a pretty unprecedented mandate from the American people, and I think he has the opportunity to leave a legacy like we haven't seen in a long time. He can allow us to get ahead truly in our competition with China, and that requires letting us build, cutting the red tape that holds us back, unleashing energy innovation, all of the above. And that also means that we can do things for our environment and for conservation that many presidents have failed to do in the last few administrations. We want to be able to make America beautiful again. We want to pick up that Teddy Roosevelt legacy, make sure that all Americans have access to clean and healthy water and air, that we're protecting our public lands and our national parks. That is a deeply conservative message, and I really believe that over the next 4 years, Donald Trump has the opportunity to cement a legacy as an environmental president that is leading on energy innovation and on environmental conservation, and future generations should want to thank him for that.
It's amazing what is ahead. And a lot of people don't know President Trump signed one of the largest conservation pieces of legislation in the history of the world just in his last term. Real quick, Chris, what's the best way for people to stay in touch with all the great work that ACC does?
Yeah, check out our website. It's acc.eco, so acc.eco. You can sign up to be a member. You can support us. Again, we're the largest conservative environmental movement in the country. You know that this issue is a conservative issue and that we're going to make America beautiful again.
Pretty amazing. Chris, thank you for making tonight's conversation possible, for all the work you're doing. We're going to be sure to have you on a lot in 2025, but thanks for joining us, my friend. All right, folks, that's all we got. It's time to hand the baton to our good friend Grant Stinchfield. Thanks for joining us for a very important conservation. Happy New Year. We'll be back tomorrow.